We're thrilled to have Bernie, who does a lot of speaking on business development. He's the co-founder of TrueCar. Everybody knows they went public, right? So all the entrepreneurs in the room don't do the right thing. Same thing, right? It's good. He's now the EVP of business development there. He has 20 years of background in doing business development. He also has a book called the Sumo Advantage, and he also has a podcast called Biz Dev. So I think he knows a little bit about this. There's a lot more details on his bio in your handout there. We're going to turn it over to him. Please welcome Bernie.
Thank you. So this is a favorite topic of mine, and it's important, I think, and I always speak from the perspective of the entrepreneur, the small company. That's really where I've been the majority of my career, and cutting these big deals, and I believe we can all do it, but there are some things, there are some nuances that it's important to focus on. And like Lev said, I don't want to just talk high level, that there are some things that hopefully you can implement. We all come to these things and, is there a little nugget here or there? And hopefully you'll get a few from this. There should be some time for some questions after. And I brought 5 books, so the first 5 people to ask questions will get a copy of the book. You got any questions already? All right, so the topic tonight, or the title of this is David and Goliath. And, I thought it was interesting because I always think about, I refer to the partners, these big partners, as the sumo. But from the David and Goliath perspective, obviously it's a biblical reference to David, who's not a warrior, actually beating Goliath. And how he beat Goliath is with an unconventional way of going to battle. It wasn't with a shield and a sword or a spear. It was with some rocks. Totally different. Goliath was not prepared for that. And that makes a lot of sense from how we go to market as well, or how we should, I should say. And with David and Goliath from a business standpoint means, we use it as, we're building this company and we're competing with the incumbent in the space, the dominant player, and how do we take them down? So it makes some sense, and if you dive deep a little more into this, it's really about asymmetric conflicts, where there's just this massive imbalance, and what happens in those scenarios. So there was a political scientist named Tuft who did a analysis on battlefield conflicts from 1800 on till present day. And what he found was that where these asymmetric conflicts existed, Goliath won over 70% of the time. That's the statistical probability of you winning or losing in a battle with a very large incumbent. Now then he looked at what happens if there were some unconventional methods used to deal with the competition or deal with the battle itself. And in that case, as you can see, the results changed dramatically, where almost 64% of the time, David won. The small guy wins. And so what that shows is unconventional methods really win. You have to think differently. And that's what we're going to talk about in regarding business development. Is that showing up full on your screen? Okay, yeah, that's good. Hit allow. Perfect, thanks. So, I'll talk about the Sumo Advantage. It's really this unfair advantage that you want to have in your space against the big incumbent, against the competition. And so, my background we talked about a little bit. In '97, I founded a company called Promise Mark. I sold that to a credit reporting agency in 2003, and that was a startup with no funding. And I had to cut I actually cut 2 Sumo deals, 2 deals with each company was a multi-billion-dollar company. It was very hard to get these deals done, and I had no credibility, and it was cool to get them. But that's a different phase. And then I went to Carfax after that, after I sold the company, and that was a company that was around for 10 years. And then they didn't have a business development team. I knew the CEO. He asked me to come in. I said, I'll spend 2 years doing this. And in 2 years, we got all the deals we wanted to. And now you see where Carfax is today, if you're familiar. They're just such the dominant player in the space. And then from there, I went and founded TrueCar. So, and then TrueCar, well-funded. We've raised hundreds of millions of dollars and then went public. So what I'm going to talk about is from my own experience, and it applies in different, with I believe, all types of companies in all different phases. Because I've been asked or I've been challenged saying, yeah, that works, but I didn't raise $50 million. And you don't have to raise a dime. Or at least, I've done it in a scenario where I didn't raise any money. I raised money after I got the deals. So when you think about Biz Dev, or you think about sales, there's this difference that I want to highlight. And let's start with, if I were to say to you, how do you grow your revenue? You would all, I mean, not all, but many think initially, oh, it's just, I have to increase my sales. And, you know, sure, you can grow revenue that way. But what I'd say is, that's not the first thing that comes to mind for me. And what I'd say is, but is that sustainable? Because there's always attrition. So if you're going to grow revenue year over year, you're going to lose some revenue, you got to make it up, and then you got to grow more. Or what is the X factor to that sale? Sales is very linear. It's $1 and $1 and $1. There's no real multiplier to that. And then does that sale impact the landscape, the strategic landscape in the market? And some sales, some deals can. Some guys you close, that 800-pound gorilla that you close can change the dynamics, but in most cases it doesn't. And that's why I say, you know, sales is important, but I believe BD is more important because it actually will help you accelerate sales faster than you can do it on your own. So let's talk about that a little bit right now. I'm going to go into TrueCar for a quick second. Not to promote TrueCar, but to give you some context around some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So if you're not familiar with TrueCar, we are a better way to buy a car. Started 9 years ago. Very, very hard industry to change. And that's why we raised a ton of money. And we went through some serious battles. The industry tried to shut us down. And that in itself is an interesting story. But if you think about TrueCar and us going to market, okay, so we started 9 years ago. And this is the idea. Hey, you get to see what everyone else paid. So put the model that you're looking for, the make and model of a car. We're going to load up all the transactions that exist, show them to you, plot them on a curve, and then we are going to provide you with upfront pricing. That means that a dealer is going to load up pricing and give you the price, and they don't even know who you are. You haven't given up your anonymity. So imagine us starting a company and going to a dealer, because the sales effort, our sales infrastructure is around selling to dealers. And going and saying, hey, listen, Mr. Dealer, we want to change the way people buy cars. So we want you to, we're going to show our customers what everyone else paid on the car. And then we want you to provide upfront pricing. And I know you're not doing it today, and by the way, no one else is doing it today, but we want you to do it. Oh, and we want you to change your behavior, and you have to really treat our customers well, or we're going to throw you off the program. So imagine what they would say, you know, beyond, you know, at least some reasonableness to it, other than, you know, F you, get the hell out of here, which many of them would have said. But there's no way we would have been able to go to market. We wouldn't be around today if we went with, here's our own website. Because the questions would come up, even if you didn't get thrown out, they'd say, well, how many visitors do you have? Well, we don't have any visitors yet, because we need you, we need the dealers in order to get the customers. Well, what's the quality? Oh, I have no idea what the quality is, but because we need you in order to get the visitors, and then when you're on, I can tell you what the quality is. Right? It's not going to work. So instead, we chose to disrupt the market and go after it with using a heavy BD strategy. And so we power over 100 brands right now. And we launched purely powering the brand. We didn't have TrueCar, we didn't have that destination site. It was all through strategic partnerships. USAA, American Express, Consumer Reports, AAA, and the list goes. Geico, Nationwide, Progressive, the list goes on and on and on. And our first big one was USAA. And I don't know if anybody USAA members here? So for all of you who don't know, USAA is this unbelievable financial institution for military. And so the only way you can get into USAA is you either have to join the military, marry into the military, or be born into the military. It's the only way. Super high quality. It's one of the most trusted brands in the world. So now So Beady goes out and gets that deal. And then now the salespeople are knocking on dealers' doors and saying, hey, do you want to be part of the USAA car buying service? Yeah, sign me up, because if you're in a military town, you know how powerful USAA is. So there was no question like, well, how many customers do you have? What's your quality? It was, sign me up now. Now some of them just fundamentally would not agree with, I don't believe in upfront pricing and all this other stuff, but we were able to now get some dealers on the program before we even had a website. So it was solving the chicken and egg issue for us. And we wouldn't have been able to do that, as I said, by going direct. So a very heavy BD strategy, which has paid off. I mean, as of today, I think we're close to $1 billion in valuation. All from this strategy. There's no way we'd be here today without launching this program first. So, and here's some examples. This is the American Express car buying service, but this is completely branded for us. So that you got a lot of responsibility when you're cutting deals like this, and you're operating under these premier brands. You have to live up to them. So there's some challenges, but if you do it well and you invest in a certain way that may seem risky at first, but it really pays off, at least in my experience. And here's an example of consumer reports. So this is all on our servers, looks like theirs. Consumer doesn't know, there's no interstitial in between saying you're about to leave our site. It's very integrated, you log in once, and then you're we pre-pop forms. There's a lot of data sharing, which is great. So with that, that should lay some context for what we're going to talk about, and I might reference them back, and if you have a question, I may reference back to TrueCar. But there really is this big distinction between sales and BD. So in order for me what I've come to find is that if I boil it down to paper cups as an example, it helps articulate the points I want to make. Because paper cups are just easy to understand. If I'm selling paper cups, like many other things, it's a numbers game. You're dialing, you're building your pipeline, 10% are going to close this month. And so if you have a pipeline out with 100,000 cups and 10% are going to close, you're going to sell 10,000 cups. And you just keep going with the numbers. Versus business development. Business development is about selling vision. All right? It's something that hasn't been done before. It's something that when the two companies come together, they can create a bigger opportunity. And it's very different from sales, but the problem that we have, or that I struggle with out there, or what I talk about, is that sales and BD are, people believe they're interchangeable. They mean the same thing, and they don't. But if you see a business card that says you're the VP of Sales and BD, generally speaking, I believe I'm working with a salesperson. Now they may have the talent for BD, but their organization, the company they work for, the CEO there just may understand sales more, and if they're compensating and motivating that individual based on a sales model, the BD deals are just not going to work because they take too long. There's no commission right away. It's just not the right alignment. So there's a huge difference between the two. There's 4 main distinctions between sales and BD. And by the way, when we do the question and answer, I really want to hear if you if you need to challenge some of these things or you don't believe in them. I'm happy to have those debates. So BD, inherently strategic. There's really nothing strategic about sales. Okay, maybe you can go and you get a distributor. And, okay, that could be somewhat strategic. It's the biggest distributor in the market. But the distributor is just, they're about distributing your products. And if they're not doing yours, they're doing someone else's, and then you'll go to that distributor's competitor. And it's really a sales opportunity. But BD is very strategic. Again, it's about these two companies coming together and thinking about, if we collaborate on X, we can do Y. It's so much bigger than us going it alone. And the thing I wanted to say about David and Goliath is David didn't do this alone either. And if you go to the biblical reference, he had God behind him, which is like the biggest sumo you can get to beat Goliath. So even in that context, you need partners. I have a podcast, and Mark Schulman, who's he's the drummer, he's really the drummer to the stars. He is the drummer of choice. He goes on tour with Pink and Cher and Sheryl Crow, and the list goes on and on. He wrote this book called Nerve Breakers, Conquering Your Fears, basically, stage fright. And he talked about these 3 C's around clarity, capability, and confidence. And here's the thing for us as entrepreneurs, we can't be great at everything. So partnering allows us to get that capability without having to focus on that as you have to be great at that as well as your core business. And so to think about how to leverage strategic partnerships to grow your business, I think really can pay off, and that's very strategic. So the second distinction, there's no direct revenue with BD. Sales, by definition, is a transaction. A sale happens, we sign an agreement, insertion order, whatever. I give you assets, you give me assets. I give you my product, you give me cash. I give you my paper cups, you give me money, based on the terms. That is a transaction. That is, in fact, sales. In BD, two companies are coming together. There's no direct revenue. There may not be revenue for a year. There may not be revenue for 2 years. There should be revenue within a year. But it takes a long time. So sales functions and salespeople are not going to be motivated to cut those deals that way, because it takes a lot of tenacity to get them. But it's all about indirect revenue. And even if there's some, sometimes I'll get a question, well, there could never be revenue. Well, there could be some money that changes hands. But relative to the size of the opportunity, it's insignificant. Maybe you need to touch someone up because they're investing heavy in some tech, and you say you'd split it with them and here's 50 or 100 grand or whatever it may be. But for the most part, the real opportunity is down the road based on the two companies collaborating and executing. Third distinction, full plate. Okay, everyone's plate is full right now. In the case of you selling paper cups to a coffee shop, you know and I know that someone is responsible for buying the paper cups. It's on their plate. If they don't buy the paper cups, the coffee shop can't sell the coffee, and that person's fired. Totally responsible for buying the paper cups. So as sales, you know they're going to buy. So the question is, are they going to buy from you or are they going to buy from someone else? In the case of BD, what you're pitching is not on their plate. They're not motivated to do it. It's not on their boss's plate. It's not on their boss's boss's plate. It's not going to affect their quarterly bonus. It's not going to affect their annual bonus. It just requires more work. It's actually risk, because since it's not on anybody's plate, they're certainly not going to get fired for saying no. So to say yes and then to try and get resources in something that's not a priority presents a risk for that individual. So those are huge distinctions between sales and BD. In sales, someone's responsible. It doesn't matter whether it's cups or enterprise software. Someone is responsible for procuring that. And good salespeople will drive that home. Those three I view as factual distinctions. Okay, the fourth is behavioral. And that is to focus on a no, and specifically not getting a no. Okay, sales is about getting to yes. ABC, always be closing. Let's get that done. Let's get to yes. What do I need to get to yes? Let's close it now. What if I shave 10% off? Will you close by the end of the month? That's getting to yes. That will never work in this environment. And so I use an example of how someone who wants to jump off a building, and the police negotiator comes down, and he doesn't say, hey, idiot, get off the building, right? He's gonna get a no, and the guy's gonna jump. So what the negotiator does is he walks in and starts building rapport, starts understanding where he's coming from, starts assessing the situation, but also spending enough time to build some sort of confidence and some sort of connection with that individual. And at some point, through they're having dialogue like, oh, you have 3 kids? I got 3 kids too. Yeah, mine just went off to high school. Ugh, that was a rough time. All these things that are identifying. Same thing in business. Because you're understanding what their problems are and you're talking about how you can work together. And at some point, there's this inflection where then the negotiator says, you know what? Come on down, let's go get a cup of coffee together. The guy gets off the building. Okay? Because he was focusing on not getting a no. No means I'm jumping. No for us in business means the opportunity is dead. I mean, we don't take no for an answer, but they want to say no. It's very easy to say no. You know what, I got 10 inbounds a day. How many of these can I say no to? Because I got to move on to the stuff that's actually on my plate. So it's very easy to say no. So what it really requires is this evangelic pitch. You are pitching something that's so convincing that they are afraid to say no. There's a slew of tactics around not getting a no. But it is truly that. It is, this train is leaving the station. This is gonna happen whether you're involved or not. Do you wanna be on the train, or do you wanna be on the train station with us going by? And that is the difference. And you almost want to, I don't wanna say incite this fear, but enough where they say, wow, if I say no, am I gonna, this could be a major mistake on my side. Because you have to overcome the dynamics that are going on, which is, it's not on my plate, it's not my boss's plate, I'm not gonna get compensated for this, it's too much risk. All these other things that go along with it. Again, these are about strategic opportunities for two companies to work together. So now that there's this concept of the sumo and the gorilla, and we all go after the gorilla, the 800-pound gorilla, and that's great, but the gorilla, really, think about what the gorilla creates for us, all right? It's not a strategic thinker at all. Gorilla is just sheer power and reactive. There's a threat or something, I'm gonna be reactive, I'm gonna stomp my feet, I'm gonna beat my chest. And from closing a gorilla, let me tell you, from a business standpoint, that's a lot of demand on us, high maintenance. There's a different type of effort that has to go into it. Sure, it's great. There's plenty of books that talk about how to do sales and close the gorilla, and that gets you a pile of cash. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a pile of cash. But that's all you're getting. And again, go for those. But what I'm saying is don't focus just on the gorilla. And you can actually get more gorillas by getting a sumo. A sumo comes with exponential power. All right? They're a strategic thinker. They understand the enterprise. They understand how to execute. They understand the rules of engagement because they know how to compete. Right? They're a warrior with you. And again, it's not that you're aligning to compete with their competitors. You're leveraging them to beat yours because we want to win. Right? So they can improve. They can prioritize. Gorillas can't do that. Gorillas prioritize themselves, and you as the customer, they're your customer, you're gonna, do what you need to do to keep them happy. And that's good, you need to do that to grow. So, what we've done at TrueCar and Carfax and other places is install this Beady layer. All right, and it sits between product and sales. All right, and it actually bolts onto product because there's some product modifications that you want to accept as part of going with a Beady strategy. All right, and this is a challenge because what's going to happen is you're going to say, gosh, we do this. I'll give you an example. So with USAA, we private label for them. Security is crazy with them. So what we want, where you log into USAA, it's a single sign-on, and then you come over to us, the USA car buying service. And we have all the data, and we pre-pop, and there's a whole slew of things that we know because it helps us present a more intelligent solution for you. But that required USA, and we were pretty secure, and they said, you know what, you need to be this secure, and it was a 7-figure check that we had to write and invest before we had one customer. Now that's maybe extreme. USA is just a super powerhouse. But the point is, then the product team had to modify a little bit to accept the data. So we're not talking about taking you off track. We're just talking about, incorporating the advantages that the Sumo has is key. And a lot of times I found the CFO, the CTO don't get it. What's the ROI on this, they'll say. Well, if you want to base it on this next quarter, the ROI is 0. Okay? And it's a stupid fucking question. I can't stand that question. Now, over 2 years, huge. 3 years, enormous. But it's hard for them to say. It's okay for them to speak about it. But those don't make the decisions. If resources are going to govern how you're going to grow the business, then Beady is really not the way to go. Because there is some investment that needs to happen. So, and I believe installing this Beady layer, well, let me go back. So, and then once it's on product, it's pushing and accelerating sales. Look at my example with TrueCar. When we got USAA. And then the salespeople are going down to the dealerships. We get paid from the dealers every time a car is sold. It's a flat marketing fee. And it just made the sales function a lot easier and a lot more successful. Dealers were saying, yes, sign me up. No question about how many visitors we had. But that was because of what we had here. Nothing else had changed in terms of a value prop. Other than, we didn't have a website. Other than, we had this major alignment. And now when we go to dealers, the upfront pricing, the transparency is not that big an issue. We have USAA and American Express and Geico, and I mentioned all the other ones. That's hugely powerful. That's super high quality. Everyone wants access to them, and those dealers want to be certified under those brands. So that's what Beady can do, and that's what will increase your revenue. Your revenue will grow without a Beady layer, but I believe the revenue will grow substantially with a Beady layer. But here's the key: not in the early period of time. So you have to accept the fact that if you're going to go after this, and you're going to have your teams go after this, that they're going to cut a deal and you're going to invest, and nothing is going to happen from a revenue standpoint for some period of time. I always say, this is a 3-year horizon. It's a 3-year commitment to get these deals done and get them running the way you want them to. And after 3 years, you'll then be able to properly forecast how well they're going to do. It just takes that long with these big guys. But I can tell you right now, there's no way we would be public. There's no way we would exist without USAA. That was a critical deal for us. When I sold that company to the credit reporting agency, it was the 2 big sumos I got on, before I even raised money, that ultimately created the enterprise value that and those contracts and the relationships that that company wanted. So, talk about the sumo. So it's about thinking strategically, as I said. If you think about why to partner, well, you're borrowing credibility. So if we're all in the startup world, we don't have a lot of credibility. We have ideas, we have passion, we're committed. How do you borrow some credibility? Well, if you're building something that has a little bit of risk to it, and you align with another partner, you're drafting off of them. And that'll help you accelerate your sales. Solves the chicken and egg issue for those that have it. Differentiation, this is key. Right? There are other car buying services out there, but when we go to the dealers, we're the only ones with USAA. All right? It really makes the difference. You stand out. It is going to change the landscape in the market by cutting these deals. It may mitigate some risk if you have to invest in something. I mean, look, Tesla and Panasonic just announced a deal today. I read it, so it was either today or yesterday. So Tesla, we all know, wants to build this gigafactory. They don't actually, even today, they don't build batteries. They understand they need to lower the cost, so they're willing to invest in the property and deal with the automation, but Panasonic is actually coming in with Tesla to, in fact, build the batteries themselves, because that's not Tesla's core competence. It's Panasonic's. Versus there's a company, A123, that went bankrupt building batteries, but Panasonic is the biggest. So that alignment is huge. It lowers the risk of Tesla's ability to execute. It's a better platform for disruption. Many of us are trying to disrupt the market. Leveraging a sumo gives us more credibility and more power to disrupt what we need to disrupt in order to gain share. And then finally, enterprise value, which I mentioned. Whether you're raising money or you want to sell, these deals help. I mean, in the early stages of a company, these are like valuation doublers. You're going for your next round, but you have validation from a big company that they want to be in the space that you're in. That's pretty good. You know, if they're that big and they have credibility in the market and they are aligning with you, it's very big for investors. So let me give you some examples. Groupon. We're all familiar with Groupon, I'm sure. As you recall, Groupon went public back in November of 2011 at $25 a share. As of today, it was $6.47, and it's not going up. It's certainly not going over $10. It's been up and down, but it quickly went down, and it hovers between 6 and 9, something like that. And if you recall, Google wanted to buy Groupon for $6 billion before they went public. Groupon said, no, we're going it alone. Now, in my view, whether that was a mistake or not, I'm not here to say financially whether that was wrong. It's more of how did Groupon respond to the fact that they know Google wants to get into their space? Okay, so they said no. And once you say no, okay, Google is high. They won't pay $6 billion for me. There's zero barrier to entry in this space. There's 100 other companies that are doing this. So Google can get into it tomorrow. right? I mean, it's not that hard to do. They've got the access to the advertisers, these local places, and Groupon is about, you know, getting 50% off a sandwich or a yoga studio or something like that, right? So, what did they do in response to saying no, knowing that Google was going to come in and there's 100 other companies that are doing it? They didn't really do anything. They cut a deal with Expedia, all right? That's okay. I look at it and say, all right, well, that's an okay deal, but that's not the right deal. Why? Because people don't think about spending $1,000 to travel on Groupon. For the most part, it's, I pay $5 for a $10 sandwich, all right? So it's the wrong type of deal. Now let's use another example. I don't know if you're familiar with Living Social. Very similar to Groupon, grew up around that Groupon time. Unlike Groupon, which didn't react or respond to what was happening in the market and what was happening with Google, Living Social went and cut a deal with Amazon. So now if you want to compete with Google, or not want to compete, excuse me, if Google's getting into your space, who's the next best choice to be on your side? Amazon. So now, when Groupon's out there and Living Social's out there, Living Social's saying, hey, do you want to be on the Amazon local program? I'd say a lot of people probably say yes to that. There's integration, and Living Social now is as big as Amazon. All right, I'm not on Living Social, I'm on Amazon buying these local things. It's huge for Living Social. That's a different way of dealing with the market. If I understand that there are competitors in the space, there's no barrier, and Google's going to get in my space, what am I going to do? How are you going to react? And ultimately, if Living Social didn't do the deal with Amazon, someone else was going to do that deal. And that's where you get flat-footed. So you have to be thinking about, or I believe we have to be thinking about, who can hurt me? Who can hurt my company? If my competitor does a deal with company X, will that hurt? And if it hurts, you either better prepare for that deal or go get that deal before they get it. Because it's going to happen. I'll give you another example. It's a small company, SpareFoot, based in Austin. They are sort of a marketplace for storage, inventory, you know, like a self-storage, which is, you'd think, oh, who gives a shit about that business? But it's actually a great business. We're like pack rats. I don't understand it, but there's 10,000 locations they have on. There's like, the supply is super short right now. It's amazing what's going on in the storage world. Anyway, so they do SEM and SEO. We're probably all doing that if we're dealing with acquiring customers that way. But they wanted, and there's competitors in their space, so what do? Well, where can I get some quality traffic and partner with this company? So they went to Penske. So now, when someone is calling up for a truck rental, the Penske operator is saying, oh, can I get you some storage? And they use SpareFoot's solution. Upfront pricing, you can book it right there, all that other stuff. But think about it from a Penske standpoint. Penske's competing with U-Haul for rentals, and U-Haul has storage, so they can package things together. Now Penske can. So SpareFoot brought something huge to the Sumo. But SpareFoot has this exclusive with Penske now. And Penske's got, that is, if you're renting a truck, there's like a high probability that you need storage. So that is super high quality, and that's now attractive to the people that they're selling to, the storage facilities, because they can say, do you want to be, you want to get access to the Penske rental people? The answer is yes. Another example is there's a company up in Seattle called Porch. They cut a deal with Lowe's. They're like an Angie's List. And so now Lowe's people, salespeople, are telling their customers, oh, do you need access? Do you want me to get you a repair facility or someone to install this? I can do that, and they use Porch for it. So it's a different way of going to market. And of course, that demand, this deal with Lowe's, also gets more repair people on board because they want to be part of the Lowe's program. So Angie's List could go direct, that's great. And so if you're going to come in as a late entry, how are you going to do it? Well, Porch decided to go with Lowe's. There's tons of examples of these things. These small companies cutting deals with big companies. And the reason why is because we're the innovators. Big companies generally don't innovate, that's why they acquire. It's too risky, they're too busy, there's all these things that don't allow them to innovate the way we can. And what I tell them, and when I think about things even for us at TrueCar, is if there's an entrepreneur out there with a team that's dedicated to do this one thing, and they have money and resources, all these other things, how could we, and it's a side business for us, could we possibly do it as well as that company that's just doing one thing? I don't think so. If it's core to the business, then you better get to be you better be an expert at it. But if it's not core, I choose partnering. You can still build a revenue share, things like that. But what it does is it allows you to expand your product velocity, your product innovation, your strategy, your marketing, whatever it is, leveraging somebody else for their benefit as well. So a lot of times I'll get a, I thought there was another, shit, all right. Missed a slide. The next slide should have been around, does this, some people will ask, well, does this only work in sort of a consumer marketplace environment? No. Microsoft just did a deal with Salesforce. There's plenty of small companies that are partnering with newspapers to go out to small businesses. Apple just did a deal with IBM purely for the enterprise, right? So it's not just about marketplace. If you're selling B2B, this absolutely applies as well. Integration can occur to make your common customer more loyal to what you and that other partner are doing. So strategic partnerships, it really is about change. You have to change your mindset within the organization. Right? It is a different way of thinking about how to grow the business, meaning it's not going to happen next quarter. You got to put the right individual on it, which gets to, then the people have to be the right people. You can't just say the salesperson can go do BD. And if they have the talent to do it, which sometimes they don't, and it's different tactics for closing. So if they're an expert at sales, they may not be the expert at BD. Because you can't do the ABC, always be closing, let's get to a yes. It's not going to work. So the people have to change. The process has to change. Process for who you identify, the process for how you structure your deals, the process for how you onboard them and maintain them later on. It's an enterprise initiative to become this BD-centric organization. A lot of things have to change. And culturally things have to change to address that, hey, why do we need something? There's plenty of people who think, well, why do we need somebody else? We can do all that here. Well, technically you can build it, but why should we build it if it's a technology thing? So these are hard deals to win. That's the other thing. They're not easy. So I'm talking about, we'll get the Sumo, and we got all these things, but these are not easy deals. Right? There's a lot that goes into it. So what I'll say, what time are we supposed to, right about now, right? Yeah. All right. So, I'll quickly, the 4 distinctions, especially not getting a no. You gotta embrace that. Here's another big one. Try to maintain control. This whole process, the whole pitch process, is about maintaining control. Because it's so easy for them to say no. So one of the things, first of all, no handouts in any pitch I ever do. And I never, ever, ever release the deck. Ever. It's a rule. And 100% of the time I get asked, can I have this presentation? No. What do you mean no? No, I don't release this. Because what they're really doing is they want to take that, then they want to go have discussions internally, and there's no way that anyone can pitch my company as good as I can, and as good as you can. So why would you give it up to someone to do it for you? So what I'll say is, the answer is, no, but if you want to show this to other people, I'll come back tomorrow, I'll come back next week, I'll come back next month. Tell me what date you're going to talk to them and I'll be here. I'll be here that day, the next day, the next day if you have 3 different meetings. And it gets over that. Because the reality is that is a loser. You've lost control and that is the way you're going to get a no. Because someone in the room that they're talking to is going to ask some questions, that individual does not have the answer, then someone else is going to say, I don't like this. And that's it. Forget about whether that individual who doesn't like it is like the most powerful person in the room. Then it's all dead for sure. So you don't give up that control. You have to maintain control. So, and I'll just leave this with deal structure because I think this is very important as you go through. One of the things that I think about, and there's some rules that I have, like not releasing the deck. First of all, you have to have executive buy-in on both sides. This is not something that 2 CEOs can do and just kick it down. Everyone has to buy into this or it's going to fail later on. Multi-year deals. These are all multi-year deals. Don't do a 1-year deal. It's not worth it. 1 year is not enough time to prove that it works. And big companies get distracted by other things. If you're committed to multiple years, then you know you're in it. And ultimately, if they don't want to do it anymore, they could just technically stop, but they won't in a 3-year deal. or a multi-year deal. I always do multi-year. If they say I want 1 year deal, the answer is no. They say I want a termination of convenience, absolutely not. Which is actually one of the things on my slide. Balance. This is key. So we're the subject matter experts in our business world. There are many times where I would have been able to, or I was able to, I could have out-negotiated the partner on the other side. Because I knew more. Don't do it. Do not take that opportunity. Why? Because it's a multi-year deal. And at some point, they're going to get up to speed enough to realize you screwed them. And now you built this relationship over the last 9 months, and now you're setting it back to 0 or lower than that if they're really pissed at you, if you violated something. Just don't do it. A partnership, it's a multi-year deal, it has to be even. It has to be balanced, it has to respect both sides. And then finally, no termination of convenience. This is a bullshit lawyer, excuse me lawyers, but a term. Lawyers are there to protect their clients, but there's really no reason to accept this term. So when I would ask, why do you need that? And generally, at this point, we're like, I always go through term sheets. So I want to work everything out with the business person. Plain English, just talk about, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, whatever, and I'll stick in, there's no termination of convenience. And generally I can get them to agree to it, but ultimately, sometimes they don't have the power, and in these big companies, the lawyers really have the power. So I'll say, well, why do you need this? Well, what if you're not doing, what if you're not doing a good job? I'll say, well, that's all covered in the SLA, service level agreements. So if we're not doing a good job, you're going to notify us, we're going to cure. If we don't cure, you can terminate. It's not even a convenience thing, you're done. You could just, any time. So you already have that. So why else do you need this? And ultimately they don't. What they're trying to do is, what you have to protect against is your individual, your champion getting fired or leaving, whatever, and someone waking up on the wrong side of the bed, or someone getting pissed about this with a customer, which can happen. And then they start hanging this over you. So it's leverage that they're going to put down on you later on, or they want to renegotiate the terms in about a year and get more money for you because they're going to say, well, I do this much volume, I want this much more money, or I'm taking it away. Because they, generally, the big guy, doesn't abide by that in many cases. Because they think they're so big. And there's certain companies in particular that just have a cultural bias towards beating the crap out of you. And it's just not okay. Again, and we're coming from a good place. I'm not saying to do this with any type of evil intent. It's all about keeping a balance. And you have to respect the lawyers. That's fine. You have lawyers too, and they're there to protect you. But these are business terms. This is not about indemnification. This is a certain business term about how we're going to work together. I know we got to go. So that's it. So I look at the Sumo Advantage. We all want this advantage, and it's really about aligning with a major market force, some sort of accelerator to help grow your business. And that's it. And I want to thank Org for having me.